I never thought I'd be driving down Highway 95 with an HOA board president screaming from inside my tiny house, but life has a funny way of surprising you. The whole ordeal started when Margaret Henderson decided my perfectly legal tiny home was somehow her jurisdiction to control. Here's how it all began. 3 months ago, I inherited a small plot of land from my grandfather just outside Riverside County. It wasn't much. Just 2 acres of desert property with mountain views and complete freedom from any homeowners association. At least that's what I thought. After years of apartment living and rent payments that kept climbing, I decided to build a tiny house on wheels. Nothing fancy, just 320 square feet of efficiency with solar panels, a composting toilet, and enough space for me and my dog, Rex. The build took 4 months. I did most of the work myself, following every building code to the letter. The house was designed to be mobile, steel frame, proper weight distribution, DOT-compliant lighting. I even got it inspected and certified. The whole point was freedom. Freedom to move, freedom from mortgage payments, and freedom from people telling me how to live. Margaret Henderson had other plans. I first met Margaret on a Tuesday morning in October. I was outside tending to my small garden when a white BMW pulled up my dirt driveway. Out stepped a woman in her mid-50s, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit and carrying a leather portfolio like she was conducting a business meeting. "Excuse me," she called out, marching toward me with purpose. "I'm Margaret Henderson, president of the Sunset Ridge HOA. We need to talk about your structure." I set down my watering can and looked at her confused. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. This property isn't part of any HOA. I checked all the records before I bought it." She opened her portfolio and pulled out a sheet of paper. "According to our latest boundary survey, your property falls within our jurisdiction. That means your dwelling needs to comply with our architectural standards." I took the paper from her hands and studied it. It was a hand-drawn map with property lines that looked like a child had sketched them. "This isn't an official survey," I said. "This looks like something you drew yourself." Margaret's face turned red. "Are you calling me a liar? I've been president of this HOA for 12 years. I know exactly where our boundaries are." "I'm not calling you anything," I replied calmly. "I'm just saying this isn't a legal document. My property deed is clear. I'm outside your HOA boundaries by nearly a quarter mile." She snatched the paper back and jabbed her finger toward my tiny house. "That eyesore violates at least 6 different covenants. Minimum square footage, permanent foundation requirements, approved color schemes. You're in violation of everything." "Even if I was in your HOA, which I'm not, this is a certified tiny house on wheels. It's considered a recreational vehicle, not a permanent structure." Margaret's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Don't try to lawyer your way out of this. You have 30 days to either bring that thing into compliance or remove it entirely. Otherwise, you'll be facing fines of $500 per day." I couldn't help but smile at the absurdity. "You can't find someone who isn't in your HOA." "We'll see about that," she said, turning on her heel and marching back to her BMW. 30 days. I watched her drive away, kicking up dust clouds in her wake. Rex trotted over and sat beside me, his tail wagging as if nothing had happened. I scratched behind his ears and shook my head. "Looks like we've got ourselves a problem, boy." The next morning, I found a certified letter in my mailbox. Inside was an official-looking document with the Sunset Ridge HOA letterhead demanding immediate compliance with architectural standards. They listed 17 different violations, from non-conforming exterior color to unauthorized livestock. Apparently, Rex counted as livestock. I spent the afternoon at the county recorder's office, pulling every document related to my property. The records were crystal clear. My land had never been part of the Sunset Ridge development. The HOA's actual boundaries ended nearly 2,500 feet from my property line. I made copies of everything and drove over to the Sunset Ridge community to have a conversation with Margaret. The HOA office was located in a strip mall just outside the development's main entrance. I found Margaret behind a desk covered in complaint forms and violation notices. She looked up when I entered, her expression souring immediately. "I have the property records you requested," I said, placing the copies on her desk. "As you can see, my land has never been part of your HOA." Margaret barely glanced at the documents. "These records are outdated. We've expanded our jurisdiction to include surrounding properties for community protection." "You can't just expand your jurisdiction," I said. "That's not how property law works." "I've consulted with our attorney," she replied smugly. "We have the right to enforce standards in any area that affects our community's property values." I leaned forward. "What attorney? Can I have their contact information?" Margaret's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "That's confidential information." "Right," I said. "Let me make something clear. You have no authority over my property. If you continue to harass me or attempt to impose fines, I'll be filing a complaint with the county and potentially pursuing legal action for harassment." Margaret stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward. "Don't you threaten me, young man. I have connections in this county that you can't imagine. Keep pushing, and you'll find out exactly how much trouble I can cause." I kept my voice level. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply stating facts." "Get out of my office," she said, pointing toward the door. "And remember, 30 days. I left the copies on her desk and walked out. In the parking lot, I called my insurance company to document the harassment and then contacted the county zoning department to file a formal complaint. I had a feeling this was far from over. I was right. 2 weeks later, I woke up to find my driveway blocked by orange traffic cones and a sign reading, "Unauthorized structure, condemned by order of Sunset Ridge HOA." Margaret's white BMW was parked sideways across my access road. I walked out to confront her, Rex following close behind. Margaret was standing next to her car, arms crossed, wearing another one of her pantsuits and a satisfied smile. "Morning, Margaret," I said. "Mind moving your car so I can get to work?" "This property is under HOA enforcement action," she announced. "No one enters or leaves until the violations are corrected." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "You're blocking my legal access to my own property. That's a crime." "I'm protecting the community," she said, looking directly into my phone camera. "This eyesore is bringing down everyone's property values." "You have no authority here," I said. "Move your car or I'm calling the sheriff." Margaret's smile widened. "Go ahead and call them. Sheriff Martinez is a close personal friend. He understands the importance of maintaining community standards." I dialed 911 and reported the blockade. While we waited, Margaret proceeded to walk around my tiny house, taking photos and making notes on a clipboard. She peered through my windows, photographed my solar panels, and even tried to open my door. "Don't touch my property," I warned. "I'm conducting an official HOA inspection," she replied. "This is all within my rights as board president." 20 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy arrived. I recognized him from the local diner, Deputy Rodriguez, a guy about my age who'd always seemed reasonable. Margaret immediately approached him with her portfolio. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she said. "This man has erected an illegal structure and is now threatening me when I try to enforce community standards." Deputy Rodriguez looked at me, then at Margaret, then at the tiny house. "Ma'am, can you show me the legal documentation that gives you authority over this property?" Margaret fumbled through her portfolio and pulled out the same hand-drawn map she'd shown me before. Rodriguez studied it for about 10 seconds. "This isn't an official survey," he said. "Do you have anything from the county or a licensed surveyor?" "I don't need county documentation," Margaret said, her voice rising. "I'm the HOA president. I know where my boundaries are." Rodriguez looked at me. "Sir, do you have your property deed?" I handed him the official documents I'd been carrying since this whole mess started. He compared them to Margaret's map and shook his head. "Ma'am, according to these official records, this property is outside your HOA boundaries. You need to move your vehicle and remove these cones. You're blocking legal access to private property." Margaret's face went crimson. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling Sheriff Martinez right now. He'll straighten this out." "Sheriff Martinez will tell you the same thing I'm telling you," Rodriguez replied. "Property law is property law. Move your car." Fuming, Margaret collected her cones and drove away, but not before rolling down her window to shout, "This isn't over!" I thanked Deputy Rodriguez and thought that might be the end of it. I should have known better. The harassment escalated over the next few weeks. Margaret began driving by my property multiple times a day, sometimes stopping to take photos or yell complaints about my illegal campsite. She contacted the county health department claiming I was operating an unpermitted septic system, even though my composting toilet was completely self-contained and legal. She called animal control, reporting Rex as a dangerous, unlicensed animal, despite his current registration and gentle temperament. Each complaint was investigated and dismissed, but the constant harassment was wearing on me. I installed security cameras and began documenting every interaction. Margaret seemed to take this as a challenge, becoming more brazen in her attempts to force me out. The breaking point came on a Friday morning in November. I had to drive into town for supplies, leaving Rex at home as usual. When I returned 2 hours later, I found Margaret's BMW parked in my driveway and Margaret herself standing on my tiny house's front porch, talking on her phone. I parked and approached cautiously, my camera already recording. Margaret saw me coming and ended her call. "There you are," she said, as if I'd kept her waiting. "We need to discuss your immediate relocation." "Get off my property," I said firmly. "You're trespassing." "I'm conducting an official inspection," she replied, trying my door handle. "This structure has been reported as abandoned." "By who?" "By concerned community members who noticed the owner was never home." I was gone for 2 hours. "Margaret, I'm going to ask you one more time to leave my property. If you don't, I'm calling the police again." Instead of leaving, Margaret did something that shocked me. She reached into her purse and pulled out a key that looked remarkably similar to my spare key that I kept hidden under a fake rock near my door. "Actually," she said, inserting the key into my lock, "I've been authorized by the county to secure this abandoned structure pending proper disposal." The key worked. My door swung open, and Margaret stepped inside my home. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. "How did you get that key?" "I have my sources," she said from inside my house. Oh my, this is even worse than I thought. No proper kitchen, bathroom facilities that violate health codes, electrical work that's clearly not up to standard. I could hear her moving around inside, opening cabinets and drawers. Rex was barking frantically from where he was tied up outside, sensing something was very wrong. "Margaret, you need to come out now," I called. "You're committing breaking and entering." "I'm conducting an official inspection." Her voice came from deeper inside the house. "Oh, what's this? Unpermitted modifications to the electrical system. This whole structure needs to be condemned immediately." I called 911 while standing outside my own home, listening to a stranger rifle through my belongings. This had gone far beyond harassment. This was a felony. When Deputy Rodriguez arrived 15 minutes later, Margaret was still inside my tiny house. I could hear her on the phone, apparently calling someone about emergency condemnation procedures. "Ma'am," Rodriguez called out, "you need to exit the structure immediately." Margaret appeared in my doorway, still talking on her phone. "Hold on," she said to whoever was on the line, then looked at Rodriguez. "Officer, I'm conducting an official HOA inspection of this non-compliant structure." "Ma'am, this is breaking and entering," Rodriguez said. "The property owner has not given you permission to enter his home." "I don't need his permission," Margaret said. "I have authority as HOA president to inspect any structure that poses a threat to community safety." Rodriguez looked at me, then back at Margaret. "Ma'am, we've already established that this property is outside your HOA boundaries. You have no authority here. Exit the structure now or you'll be arrested for trespassing and breaking and entering." Margaret's phone call had apparently ended because she was now focused entirely on Rodriguez. "Officer, I think you're confused about the scope of HOA authority. Let me call Sheriff Martinez and clear this up." "Sheriff Martinez isn't going to change property law," Rodriguez replied. "Exit the structure. Now!" That's when Margaret made her fatal mistake. Instead of leaving my tiny house, she stepped back inside and closed the door. "I'm not leaving," her voice came through the walls. "This structure is being officially condemned. The owner can file an appeal with the county if he disagrees." Rodriguez looked at me and shook his head. "Sir, this is definitely criminal trespassing. I'm going to have to arrest her." "Actually," I said, an idea forming in my mind, "I have a better solution." I walked over to my truck, which was parked about 20 feet from the tiny house. The beauty of a tiny house on wheels is that it's designed to be mobile. I'd built it with a proper hitch system, DOT-compliant lighting, and all the safety features required for road travel. "What are you doing?" Rodriguez asked as I backed my truck up to the house's hitch. "She says she's not leaving my house," I said, getting out to connect the electrical and safety chains. "So I'm taking my house somewhere she might change her mind." Rodriguez couldn't help but smile. "That's actually pretty clever. Is that legal?" "It's my house on my property," I said, checking the hitch connection. "As long as I follow traffic laws, I can tow it wherever I want." From inside the house, Margaret's voice was getting louder. "What's that noise? What's happening out there?" I climbed back into my truck and started the engine. The tiny house lifted slightly as the truck took the weight. Everything was properly connected and secure. "Sir," Rodriguez said, "where exactly are you planning to take her?" "I thought I'd drive to the sheriff's station," I said. "That way she can file her complaint with Sheriff Martinez in person." The deputy was trying not to laugh. "That's about 20 miles from here." "Yep," I said. "Should give her plenty of time to reconsider her position." I put the truck in drive and slowly pulled forward. The tiny house followed smoothly, just as it was designed to do. From inside, Margaret's voice rose to a shriek. "Stop! What are you doing? You can't move the house with me in it?" I rolled down my window. "You said you weren't leaving my house, Margaret, so my house and I are going for a drive." "This is kidnapping!" she screamed. "No," Rodriguez called out. "This is a homeowner exercising his right to relocate his mobile dwelling. You're free to exit at any time." I began pulling down my driveway at about 5 miles per hour. The house tracked perfectly, its professional-grade suspension system keeping everything stable. Margaret was pounding on the walls and screaming about lawsuits and Sheriff Martinez. "Let me out! Let me out right now!" I stopped the truck. "Door's unlocked, Margaret. You can leave anytime you want." The pounding stopped. I could hear her trying the door handle, then footsteps as she apparently moved away from the door. A moment later, the pounding resumed from a different part of the house. "The door is locked! You locked me in here!" I got out of the truck and walked back to the house. The door was indeed locked, but from the inside. Margaret had apparently engaged the deadbolt in her panic. "Margaret," I called through the door, "you locked yourself in. The deadbolt is on your side. Don't lie to me. Open this door immediately." "I can't open it from out here. You have to unlock it yourself." Rodriguez was standing nearby, radio in hand. "Ma'am, the door is unlocked from the outside. You need to turn the deadbolt counterclockwise to open it." "I'm not stupid," Margaret shouted. "This door won't open." I could hear her struggling with the lock mechanism. In her panic, she was probably turning it the wrong direction or not pushing the door while turning the bolt. It's a common mistake people make when they're stressed. "Take a deep breath, Margaret," I called out. "Turn the bolt to the left while pushing the door. Don't tell me what to do. Get me out of here." Rodriguez keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I'm going to need a supervisor out here. We've got a unique situation." I got back in the truck. "I'm going to continue to the sheriff's station," I called back to Margaret. "Once we get there, someone can help you with the door." "No! Stop this truck right now!" I put the truck in drive and continued down the road. The tiny house followed smoothly, its weight properly distributed and suspension system absorbing the bumps. I'd built it to be towable at highway speeds, so the current pace of 15 miles per hour was no strain on the system. Margaret's screaming continued for the first mile, then gradually subsided into what sounded like phone calls. I could hear her trying to reach someone, probably Sheriff Martinez or whoever she thought could help her. Deputy Rodriguez followed behind us in his patrol car, emergency lights flashing to warn other drivers about our unusual convoy. At one point, he used his PA system to update Margaret. "Ma'am, we're about 15 minutes from the sheriff's station. Deputy Chen will meet us there to assist with the door." "I want this maniac arrested for kidnapping," Margaret shouted back. "Ma'am, you entered his residence without permission and refused to leave. He's simply exercising his right to relocate his mobile home. You can exit at any time by unlocking the door." About halfway to the sheriff's station, Margaret's tone changed. The screaming stopped, and I could hear her talking on the phone in a much calmer voice. I couldn't make out the words, but she was clearly having a serious conversation with someone. When we reached the sheriff's station, a small crowd had gathered. Word had apparently spread about the woman trapped in a tiny house, and several deputies were waiting with curious expressions. Sheriff Martinez himself was standing in the parking lot, arms crossed and shaking his head. I parked the truck and tiny house in the station's parking lot and got out. Sheriff Martinez approached me immediately. "Son, I've been getting some very interesting phone calls about you," he said. "I imagine you have, Sheriff. Let me explain what happened." Before I could continue, the tiny house door flew open and Margaret stumbled out, her hair disheveled and her cream pantsuit wrinkled. She immediately marched toward Sheriff Martinez. "Tom, thank God you're here. This criminal kidnapped me. I want him arrested immediately." Sheriff Martinez held up his hand. "Slow down, Margaret. I've already gotten the full story from Deputy Rodriguez. You entered this man's home without permission and refused to leave when asked." "I was conducting an official HOA inspection." "On property that isn't part of your HOA," the sheriff replied. "I've seen the property records, Margaret. You had no authority to enter his home." Margaret's face was turning red again. "That's impossible. I know exactly where our boundaries are." Sheriff Martinez nodded to one of his deputies, who handed him a folder. "I had our county surveyor pull the official records. Your HOA boundaries end 1,543 feet from Mr. Johnson's property line. You never had any authority over his land." Margaret grabbed the folder and flipped through it frantically. "This can't be right. We've been enforcing standards in that area for years." "Then you've been operating outside your legal authority for years," Sheriff Martinez said. "Which brings us to the current situation. You committed criminal trespassing and breaking and entering. Mr. Johnson would be within his rights to press charges." I stepped forward. "Sheriff, I don't want to press charges. I just want the harassment to stop." Margaret spun toward me. "Harassment? You kidnapped me." "I moved my own house with you in it because you refused to leave," I corrected. "The door was never locked from the outside. You could have left at any time." Sheriff Martinez looked at Margaret sternly. "Margaret, you've put me in a very difficult position here. We've been friends for years, but what you did today was clearly illegal. If Mr. Johnson wanted to press charges, you'd be looking at felony breaking and entering." Margaret's expression shifted from anger to panic. "Tom, you can't be serious. I was protecting the community." "You were trespassing on private property," he replied. "And from what I understand, this isn't the first incident. There have been multiple complaints about harassment." Deputy Rodriguez joined the conversation. "Sheriff, we've responded to this property 4 times in the past month. Each time it's been Mrs. Henderson making false claims about violations or emergencies." Sheriff Martinez nodded. "Margaret, here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop all contact with Mr. Johnson. No more driving by his property, no more complaints to county departments, no more HOA enforcement actions. If I get one more call about you harassing this man, I will personally ensure that charges are filed." "But the community standards," Margaret began. "Don't apply to his property," the sheriff interrupted. "This ends today." Margaret looked around at the assembled deputies, all of whom were clearly not on her side. Her shoulders sagged as the reality of the situation sank in. "Fine," she said quietly. "But I want it on record that I was acting in the community's best interests." "It's on record that you committed breaking and entering," Sheriff Martinez replied. "Mr. Johnson is being very generous by not pressing charges." Margaret walked back to her BMW without another word. As she drove away, Sheriff Martinez turned to me. "Son, I apologize for all the trouble she's caused you. Margaret means well, but she sometimes gets carried away with the HOA authority." "I understand, Sheriff. I just want to live peacefully on my own land." "You should be able to do that without harassment," he said. "If she bothers you again, call us immediately." I drove my tiny house back home that afternoon, thinking the ordeal was finally over. Margaret's BMW didn't appear in my driveway for the rest of the week, and the constant phone calls to county departments stopped. For the first time in months, I was able to enjoy the peace and quiet I'd moved out here to find. But I underestimated Margaret's determination. The following Monday, I found a certified letter in my mailbox from something called Riverside County Community Standards Enforcement. The letter informed me that my property had been reported for multiple code violations and that an inspector would be visiting within the next 5 business days. I called the number on the letterhead and was transferred to a woman who identified herself as Inspector Davis. "Mr. Johnson, we've received several complaints about your property," she said. "Unpermitted structures, illegal sewage disposal, unlicensed animal keeping, and several other issues." "Who filed these complaints?" I asked. "I can't release that information, but we take all complaints seriously. I'll need to schedule a full inspection of your property." I agreed to meet her the following Thursday. When Inspector Davis arrived, she was professional and thorough, examining my tiny house's construction, electrical systems, water supply, and waste management. She checked Rex's registration and vaccination records. She measured property lines and reviewed my permits. After 2 hours, she sat down with me at my picnic table and went through her findings. "Mr. Johnson, I have to tell you, these complaints appear to be completely frivolous," she said. "Your tiny house meets all applicable codes for a mobile dwelling. Your sewage system is fully compliant. Your dog is properly licensed and vaccinated. Someone has been wasting a lot of my time and yours. Can you tell me who filed the complaints now?" Inspector Davis consulted her clipboard. "I'm not supposed to, but given the circumstances, all 7 complaints came from the same person, Margaret Henderson." I wasn't surprised, but I was frustrated. "Is there anything I can do to stop this?" "I'm going to file a report stating that all complaints were unfounded and appear to be harassment," she said. "If Mrs. Henderson files any more frivolous complaints, we'll start charging her for inspection fees." That afternoon, I received a call from Sheriff Martinez. "I heard Margaret's still causing you trouble," he said. "Filing false complaints with the county isn't technically illegal, but it's getting close to harassment territory." "What can I do, Sheriff?" "Document everything. Keep records of every complaint, every phone call, every time she drives by your property. If we can establish a pattern of harassment, we can take legal action." I started keeping a detailed log of Margaret's activities. She had apparently shifted tactics from direct confrontation to bureaucratic warfare, filing complaints with every county department she could think of. Animal control, health department, building inspection, fire marshal. My phone rang constantly with officials who needed to investigate reports about my property. Each investigation found nothing wrong, but the disruption to my life was significant. I was missing work to meet with inspectors, spending money on documentation fees, and dealing with constant stress from the ongoing harassment. The final straw came 3 weeks later. I was working in my garden when I heard Rex barking frantically from behind the house. I ran around the corner to find Margaret Henderson attempting to load him into a metal cage in the back of a county animal control truck. "What the hell are you doing?" I screamed, running toward them. The animal control officer, a young woman who looked very uncomfortable, held up her hand. Sir, we received a report that this animal was abandoned and potentially dangerous. That's my dog! He's not abandoned! Margaret stepped forward with a clipboard. This animal has been running loose on the property for weeks with no supervision. I documented multiple instances of aggressive behavior toward community members. I pulled out my phone and showed the animal control officer Rex's registration and vaccination records. He's properly licensed and he's never been aggressive toward anyone. The officer looked at the documents, then at Rex, who was wagging his tail and trying to lick her hand through the cage bars. Ma'am, this dog doesn't appear to be abandoned or aggressive. I have photos of him running loose, Margaret insisted, pulling out her phone. He's clearly a public safety threat. I looked at Margaret's photos. They showed Rex in my own yard behind a clearly visible fence, playing with a tennis ball. These photos show him on my own property, I said. Behind a fence. The animal control officer studied the photos, then looked around my property. The fence was obvious and properly maintained. Rex had never been loose on anyone else's property. Ma'am, I'm not seeing any evidence of abandonment or aggressive behavior, the officer said to Margaret. This appears to be a properly cared-for animal on its owner's property. Margaret's face went through several color changes. You people don't understand the severity of the situation. This entire property is a public health hazard. The dog is just one part of the problem. The animal control officer released Rex from the cage and handed me the leash. Mr. Johnson, your dog is clearly well cared for and properly contained. I'm sorry for the confusion. After she left, Margaret and I stood facing each other in my driveway. Her latest gambit had failed, but I could see in her expression that she wasn't giving up. This isn't over, she said, echoing her words from months earlier. I'll find a way to get rid of you in that eyesore you call a house. Something inside me snapped. I'd been patient, reasonable, and legal in every interaction. I'd endured months of harassment, false complaints, and attempts to steal my property and my dog. I was done being the victim. Actually, Margaret, it is over, I said calmly, because now I'm going to make some complaints of my own. That evening, I spent 3 hours on the phone and computer, documenting every interaction I'd had with Margaret Henderson. I compiled video recordings, copies of false complaints, records of trespassing incidents, and statements from county officials about the frivolous nature of her reports. Then I started making calls. My first call was to the California State Attorney General's office. Filing false reports with government agencies is a misdemeanor offense, and I had documentation of at least 15 separate incidents over 3 months. My second call was to a civil attorney who specialized in harassment cases. Margaret's behavior met the legal definition of stalking under California law, and I had extensive documentation to prove it. My third call was to the Sunset Ridge HOA's management company. I'd done some research and discovered that Margaret's behavior was creating liability issues for the entire organization. HOA board members who act outside their authority can be personally sued for damages. Within a week, things began to change rapidly. The State Attorney General's office opened an investigation into Margaret's false complaints. The civil attorney sent Margaret a cease and desist letter threatening immediate legal action if the harassment continued. Most importantly, the HOA management company called an emergency board meeting to address Margaret's unauthorized activities. I wasn't invited to that meeting, but I heard about the results from my neighbor Tom, whose property actually was part of the Sunset Ridge HOA. It was brutal, Tom told me over coffee at the local diner. The management company had lawyers there and everything. Turns out Margaret's been operating way outside her authority for years, not just with you. She's been threatening people, making up rules that don't exist, and creating legal liability for the entire HOA. What happened? They voted her off the board immediately, Tom said. Unanimous vote. The lawyers said her behavior was putting everyone at risk of lawsuits. I felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. Margaret's reign of terror was finally over. But Margaret had one last surprise for me. 2 days after the HOA meeting, I came home from work to find Margaret's BMW parked in my driveway again. My security cameras showed that she'd been there for over 2 hours, just sitting in her car, staring at my tiny house. I parked behind her car, blocking her exit, and approached her window. She rolled it down as I got close. "Hello, Margaret," I said. "You're trespassing again?" Her appearance had changed dramatically. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "They took everything from me," she said, her voice hollow. "My position, my authority, my respect in the community. All because of you. All because you couldn't respect property lines and the law," I corrected. "I gave 12 years of my life to that community," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "I protected property values, maintained standards, kept the riffraff out, and they threw me away like garbage." I felt a moment of sympathy for her, but then I remembered the months of harassment, the attempted theft of my dog, and the breaking and entering incident. "Margaret, you need to leave now," I said firmly. "If you don't, I'm calling the sheriff." She started her car but rolled the window down further. "You think you've won, but you haven't. I'll find another way. There's always another way." She drove off, leaving me standing in my driveway with an uneasy feeling. Her tone suggested this wasn't over, despite everything that had happened. I was right to be concerned. Over the next month, strange things began happening around my property. My mailbox was vandalized twice. Someone cut my power line during the night, leaving me without electricity for 2 days. My water tank was contaminated with dish soap, requiring a complete flush and refill. I installed additional security cameras and motion sensors, but whoever was causing the damage was careful to avoid being caught on camera. The incidents always happened during storms or on cloudy nights when visibility was poor. Sheriff Martinez increased patrols in my area, but they couldn't be there constantly. The harassment had become more subtle, but more destructive. The situation came to a head on a Thursday evening in January. I was inside working on my laptop when Rex started barking frantically outside. I looked through my window and saw a figure in dark clothing near my propane tank. I grabbed a flashlight and my phone, calling 911 as I headed outside. "This is Jake Johnson on Oak Ridge Road. Someone's tampering with my propane system." By the time I got outside, the figure was gone, but I could smell gas in the air. Someone had loosened the connection between my propane line and the tank. If I hadn't caught it when I did, the leak could have led to an explosion. Deputy Rodriguez arrived within 10 minutes, followed by the fire department. They confirmed that the connection had been deliberately tampered with and could have created a deadly situation. "Mr. Johnson, this has escalated beyond harassment," Rodriguez said. "This is attempted sabotage, possibly attempted murder. We need to catch whoever's doing this." I showed him my security camera footage from the past month. While we couldn't see faces clearly, the same general body type appeared in several incidents. Someone of medium height and build, always wearing dark clothing and a hood or hat. "We're going to set up surveillance," Rodriguez said. "If this person comes back, we'll be ready." They didn't have to wait long. 2 nights later, at 2:30 a.m., my motion sensors triggered and began recording. The same dark figure approached my tiny house, but this time they were carrying what looked like a gas can. I was awake immediately and on the phone with 911 while watching the live camera feed. The figure was pouring liquid around the base of my house. They were trying to set it on fire. "They're trying to burn down my house," I told the dispatcher. "Send everyone." I could hear sirens in the distance, but I knew they might not arrive in time. The figure was now pulling something from their pocket, matches or a lighter. I grabbed my own flashlight and burst out of the house, shouting at the top of my lungs, "Hey, get away from my house!" The figure looked up, startled, and I got my first clear look at their face in the beam of my flashlight. It was Margaret Henderson. She was holding a lighter in one hand and an empty gas can in the other. The smell of gasoline was overwhelming. She had poured fuel all around the base of my tiny house and was seconds away from lighting it. "Margaret, what are you doing?" I shouted, though the answer was obvious. Her face was wild, desperate. "You ruined my life! You took everything from me! Now I'm going to take everything from you!" She flicked the lighter, and a small flame appeared. I didn't have time to think. I sprinted toward her, knowing that if she dropped that lighter, my house would go up in flames with Rex still inside. I tackled her just as she was lowering the flame toward the gas-soaked ground. We both went down hard, the lighter flying from her hand and extinguishing as it hit the dirt. Margaret was screaming and clawing at me, completely unhinged. "Let me go! Let me finish this! You destroyed me!" I held her down until the sheriff's deputies arrived 30 seconds later. They pulled her off me and immediately placed her in handcuffs while the fire department checked for any remaining fire hazards. Sheriff Martinez arrived as they were loading Margaret into the patrol car. She was still screaming about how I had ruined her life and destroyed the community. "Well," the sheriff said, looking at the gas can and the soaked ground around my house, "I think we finally have enough evidence for some serious charges." Margaret Henderson was charged with attempted arson, criminal trespassing, stalking, harassment, filing false police reports, and destruction of property. The attempted arson charge alone carried a potential sentence of up to 9 years in prison. At her arraignment, she tried to represent herself and spent 20 minutes ranting about HOA authority and community standards before the judge cut her off and ordered a psychological evaluation. The evaluation found that Margaret had developed an obsessive fixation on maintaining control over her environment to the point where she couldn't accept that some things were outside her authority. The loss of her HOA position had triggered a complete breakdown. She eventually accepted a plea deal that included 2 years in prison, 5 years of probation, a restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 feet of my property, and restitution for all the damage she had caused. The Sunset Ridge. HOA also settled a civil lawsuit with me for $50,000 to cover the costs of security systems, property damage, and the emotional distress caused by their former board president's actions. I used part of that money to upgrade my tiny house with better security features and a more robust electrical system. The rest went into a savings account for future adventures. Margaret served 18 months of her sentence and was released on parole. As far as I know, she moved to another state and hasn't been involved with any HOAs since then. As for me, I'm still living peacefully on my 2 acres with Rex. My garden is thriving, my solar panels are working perfectly, and I haven't had a single complaint from any legitimate authority in over a year. Sometimes I think about that crazy day when I drove down the highway with Margaret screaming from inside my tiny house. At the time, it seemed like the situation couldn't get any more bizarre. I had no idea that she would eventually try to burn down my home with me inside it. But in the end, justice prevailed. Margaret learned that there are consequences for harassment, trespassing, and attempting to destroy other people's property. The legal system worked exactly as it was supposed to, protecting my rights and holding her accountable for her actions. My tiny house is still mobile, still perfectly legal, and still parked exactly where it was when this whole ordeal began. The only difference is that now I have peace and quiet to enjoy it. And if another HOA Karen ever shows up in my driveway with a fake survey and a bad attitude, well, I still know how to hitch up my truck and take my house for a drive.